One. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again on The Hidden Place. My name is Renee Mayers, and today we are speaking on forgiveness. What does it look like to forgive? And what does that look like when you're in your hidden place? Who do you forgive? What do you forgive them for? What is forgiveness? We also have a guest speaker today, Miss Rachel McKenzie, a good friend of mine. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
Can't wait to hear your insights and your story about your forgiveness journey. You have an incredible story, and so thanks for being on here. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Rachel, can you start out by giving us just a quick snapshot of your life journey before we head into the topic of forgiveness, just so people get some context?
For sure. Yeah, it definitely helps to have some context. My story is a pretty wild one. I was raised in the occult. And so the full on kingdom of darkness, what nobody really ever sees in the light, I was born into it and raised in it and trained in it, which meant that I lived with a lot of trauma and abuse for the reason of control. The enemy manipulates by pain and fear. He's motivated, by all the opposite things to God. So
Yeah.
he traumatizes so that he can control through fear and the fear of pain. And so I was taken to a lot of satanic rituals. I had to undergo a lot of programming because of that, which is um, I won't even go into all the details, but it involves a lot of pain and trauma because the enemy needs to be able to have a foothold in you so he can control something. And so between the family that I grew up in and the life that I was living in the dark that I was unaware of, I was broken apart in extreme dissociation, so extreme fragmentation. I had a couple of thousand parts. They all lived at night and I lived in the day, and our worlds didn't coincide at all until things started leaking through to me and falling apart. And that was how God brought me to the realization that I needed freedom and that he wanted to bring me out from that world. So the level of forgiveness that I'd love to share is maybe a little bit of an unusual one because a lot of what was done to me was very unknown to me. So either it was kept and hidden in my parts. So I didn't necessarily always have names or faces. I had vague, hazy ideas of the pain that I was living in. I would feel it, but I couldn't actually put a pin on the event or the moment that caused it. And that is a whole other level of having to walk forward into forgiveness. But there are definitely people in my family and people that I knew of that God had to walk me through specifically to forgive. But there was a huge distinction that he brought me to, which is probably the biggest thing I'd love to share, is that forgiveness becomes very real for us if we can differentiate between the person God created and the influence of the enemy in the person. Because I realized for me, I had to become a little bit like David, where he said, God, I hate those who hate you. But I also had to realize that every person is made in God's image. And at one point or another, they have to make a choice that aligns with the enemy and the enemy's will. So if I actually look farther than the person, I have to realize that what I hate is the enemy. And I will always hate the enemy, but I don't have to hate the person. They have made choices, yes. They have aligned with the enemy. They are doing the enemy's works. But I had to actually separate between what was spiritual and what was the person in front of me to be able to forgive in truth. And that's a bit of an unusual concept for forgiveness. It's easy when you know the person and what they've done to hurt you. It's harder if you don't always know, but you definitely can understand that the influence of the enemy behind the person is what's causing them to do something. And I had to realize that because I also was used by the enemy. So forgiveness for me started with the realization that I actually was just as bad as everyone who hurt me because I was used in the same way to do the same actions. And so I had to take that step back and say, God, if you have fully and freely forgiven me, then I am actually denying that to myself if I can't extend it to those who also hurt me.
Right. Right. We are
Yeah.
commanded to forgive.
Yeah.
To forgive. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a hard one for me to walk through because when I first came into even the knowledge of what my life was and the knowledge of who I was supposed to be in that kingdom and the knowledge and the awareness of what had actually been done to me, there was a sense of justice that I had a hard time getting by. And Jesus had to redefine a lot of that for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to realize that justice is always going to be his.
Mm-hmm.
And that the people that I even wanted to rain hellfire and brimstone down on because they had caused so much evil and inflicted so much pain, the people probably weren't even the ones that God will bring justice to, because he knows so much better than I do the actual enemy. And so
Mm-hmm.
I had to trust in that so much. I had to lean on him so much for forgiveness because I didn't even know necessarily the people and the situations I was supposed to extend forgiveness towards. He had to show me. He had to show
Wow.
me where that anger or that hatred was sitting in me, and he had to put a face and a name to it for me. And
Wow.
once he did, he offers me the ability to forgive, but he always says, this is your choice and this is why.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is not about them. Forgiveness releases you from everything you carry because of it. It will actually release them into God's justice and out of my justice.
Right.
And that was a big distinction, was to know where I wanted justice in this world, God promises to me, and I will never maybe see it in this world. And I have to realize that's okay, because he will ultimately be able to put the enemy in his place, and I don't have to do that.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And I mean, so this journey of forgiveness for you, it was thrashed out in that hidden place with him, right? In that intimate friendship with him, when you would
Yeah.
sit with him and be like, how do I even do this?
Yeah.
What was this situation? Who do I forgive? And so that intimacy in that hidden place and being with him, he is the hidden place, like just his presence, right?
Yes.
Would have been so
Yes.
powerful, like the power of that intimacy with him, for him to even be able to speak into that for you. So that hidden place for you would have been incredibly important just to
It
even be able to
so
start that
was.
journey. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it so was, because I had to rely on him completely to show me where I needed to forgive. I had to rely on him to give me the names, the faces, the places. I had to trust him that he was guiding me in the right direction even. And in that, I learned to hear him so well. And I think that even is a big key in forgiveness, is what does he have to say about it? Because when
Yeah.
you see his perspective, when you've received his perspective on things, it actually can make forgiveness that much easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also love what you said earlier about it being a choice, because forgiveness
Mm,
actually has nothing to do with the emotions
mm,
attached to the
mm.
situation at all. It is a
No.
choice to be obedient and to accept the consequences for what they are, and to release the other individual, the group, the organization, the
Mm,
government,
mm,
whatever it is. You're releasing
mhm.
it. You're just not
Yeah.
holding it against them anymore. But it's a choice. And I found, for me, I often have to ask the Holy Spirit, I have to ask Jesus, give me the strength to make that choice, because I want to walk in obedience to you. I do not want to hold this against this person. I do not want to hold this against this person anymore. Like,
Yeah.
it's done, it's finished. So was it helpful for you as well in that process of forgiving, when you could, when you knew enough to be able to separate the actions, the words, and the situation from those particular individuals,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
just
definitely.
lay it at the cross and be like, I'm
Yeah.
releasing you,
Yeah.
right? Like, walk us through your process. Like, how would it look for you
Yeah.
to do that? What did that look like?
Well, it was a bit of a challenge in that I definitely had to filter a lot of the choice of forgiveness through the window of myself. I had to be able to say, God, if I actually lived out these actions and I did evil things because I was forced to, then how can I hold accountable someone else who might actually be in the same position as me?
Hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
biggest first step, in all honesty, was actually to receive full forgiveness for myself. That took a
Right.
long time, actually.
Wow.
I didn't realize just how much of What he was offering to me, I didn't feel worthy of. What he was giving me, I didn't feel like I could accept. And he would show me how much of my life and my actions was not my will. It wasn't my choice. And yet, when your own hands are stained, you sometimes have a hard time looking past that to the initiator of the evil, right? Or to the initiator of the action. And I had to receive the forgiveness for myself first. I had to secondly actually forgive God. Didn't realize that I held
Mm-hmm.
unforgiveness against him
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
for
can.
allowing me to, yeah, for
Well, we
allowing me
totally
to walk
can.
through that.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that if I hadn't actually let him off the hook, I would never be able to let other people off the hook. So I had to release my anger and my unforgiveness towards him before I could even start with people. So it started with myself, and then it went to God, and then I turned my attention to other people. And by the time I got there, I would wrestle with him on paper often, or even in my anger and my emotions. I would wrestle with him about the forgiveness. And then I would finally hit the point of saying, I know that I need to do this for me. And so I literally am just making the choice, and I'm allowing my emotions to line up afterwards, but the choice is first.
Right.
I'm going to walk in that direction first. I did write letters. I definitely had some letters that I sent, which is shocking, to a couple people in my family, but I also had letters that I would write out to people that I never sent. They were just for me. And the ability to actually express the emotion behind the choice to forgive was really important. I couldn't downplay it. I couldn't downplay how much I hated something or someone. I couldn't deny it and put a good face on it in order to be able to forgive. I actually had to face it raw. I had to face it as it was and acknowledge this is actually how I feel, God. But even in the midst of feeling that much, I will still make the choice to forgive because it's right
Mm-hmm.
for me
Mm-hmm.
and it's what you're asking of me. And I realized for forgiveness, it it's a little trite to me if I don't feel the depths of it in its raw form, because only then, when I face that, am I able to give it wholly and completely with no strings attached, because I've actually wrestled with that and then made the decision. And
Right.
if I am willing to face that, he will definitely take me through all of that. He will walk through it with me. But then as I come out of the wrestling and I've dealt with the emotions, the forgiveness step, it became easier. In a very weird way, it actually became easier because I realized I faced it fully with him. And then, like you just said, he gave me the strength. I had to ask him for the strength and the ability. Us in our humanness, we don't want to forgive, right? We want to hold on. We want justice. We want to exact vengeance. We want to be taken from the place of wounding to the place of right. I want to be made right. I want the situation to be made right. And God, I don't think ever really promises that, but he does promise us the healing and the freedom that comes with forgiveness.
Yeah.
And so we have to go about it his way.
Yeah,
And his way is
absolutely.
perfect. His way is so
Absolutely.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so powerful. Two things I love that you mentioned. First of all, we need to forgive God because we all blame him. Let's face it,
Mm-hmm.
when things go
Yep.
wrong, and he is never the perpetrator. He is never
Yep.
the perpetrator ever. But he's the first person we blame
Totally.
when things are hurting, right?
Yes.
And then secondly, that oh, I had a second point, now I lost it. Right.
Was it
That
that?
yeah, no, I got it. That you can't invalidate the emotions that are attached with whatever's happened at
Mhm.
all. You
At all.
what happened. Your anger, your pain, your hurt, your abandonment, your rejection, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is valid and real, and it is
Mm-hmm.
and forgiving someone doesn't mean it never happened, and it
Yeah.
doesn't ever invalidate your emotions that are attached to that particular circumstance or
Yeah.
incident at all,
Yep.
right?
At
And those
all.
emotions
No.
need to be healed, and that's where he comes in with healing, and forgiveness is always a key part of healing for anyone's journey, is forgiving the people who hurt you,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
so key. It's so, so key.
It's
Yeah.
so key. The biggest thing he ever said to me, this is the last thing that I'll say, but it was the most profound for me, is that when I was wrestling with it and I was wrestling with the emotions and I was telling God, I don't want to have to forgive entirely, because in my mind it's saying that I'm letting that person completely off the hook and that they will never be accountable for their actions. And he stopped me and he said, You have to realize, he said, that I am more angry at what has happened to you than you could ever be. And all of a sudden, I realized, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
he will take care of
he
this.
will.
Everything that I release will go into his hands. It's not like it
Hmm.
disappears. Like you said, it's
Hmm.
not like it goes away. I've
No.
done my part, and I can actually entrust those things and those people and those situations into his hands for what he needs to do. And then I get to walk away free.
Yeah. Yeah. It's for
Yeah.
our freedom. That's why
Yeah.
forgiveness is so important.
Yeah.
It helps eliminate the resentment and the bitterness and the anger and the hatred and everything that becomes so toxic
Oh,
to
yeah.
us, not even to the other
Yeah.
people, right? Like in so
Yeah.
many circumstances, what do they care? You know,
Yeah.
it damages us if we don't forgive. That's why it's so
Yeah.
important, right? And God wants to give us justice. He has a heart to see justice happen. He's a God of justice, but that
Yes.
forgiveness piece is absolutely crucial. Well,
Yeah.
Rachel, this is huge. Thank you. I love it. Now we're running out of time, but I do want you, can you tell us more about your book and more about your upcoming projects and where people can find your story? Because you do have an incredible story.
Thank
So
you.
where can they
Yes,
go?
it's a wow God story. I love sharing wow God stories. So my book is available on my website. It is rachelmckenziebooks.com. Rachel is Rachel, McKenzie, Mckenzie. So rachelmckenziebooks.com. My book softcover and my ebook is available on there. The story is about becoming the person God created me to be and coming out of the world and the kingdom of occult and into freedom and light and healing. And so it's called Becoming Rachel because I didn't grow up with that name. I actually grew up under an entirely different identity that I had to walk out of and walk into the new with him. So it's called Becoming Rachel. And it is the journey of that. It goes from my childhood into my time of deliverance in 2002. And when I walked out, the freedom and the healing. And it actually goes right up until last year. The story is sometimes a long journey, but it's so worth it. That's the biggest thing I will always say to people. The journey towards healing is so worth it. And so the next book that's coming out is a complementary book to it, which includes a whole collection of poetry. Poetry was how my world fell apart and how God actually brought me back together. It was how truth leaked through to me from all of my dissociated and fragmented parts. They started telling me about the life that I was living unawares. And so I wanted to extend to people the full collection of all those poems because I do include some of them in the first book. And so that is called Truth Leaks, and it's coming spring of 2023. So that's exciting. And I also starting to host some writing workshops because I have a passion for writing and for words and for the impact and the power that they can have in people's lives. And I just want to spark people into what writing and words can mean for them, just like it did for me. God has the ability to use so many mediums. And so I've started doing some writing workshops. I also have a Facebook and Instagram for my author accounts. And so I can be found on there and I will post what upcoming things there are happening. So that's a snapshot.
Awesome. Awesome. Busy
Yeah.
lady. It's great.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah, I will have a write up. I'll have the link for Rachel's book in the podcast write up as well, guys. So if you guys are interested in taking a look at her book, please do. It's very, very powerful. It's an amazing story. So Rachel, thanks so much again for being here. So
Uh,
great to talk to you about this topic. It's so important, and I really appreciate everything that you had to say. It was great.
Thank you, Renee. It was a blessing, and I bless you for hosting me. I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, honey. Take care.